Most of the time, it just kind of starts off with just stating, your name, your rank, if you want. And
Okay,
then,
for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
That way of introduction?
Yeah, introduction, exactly.
Okay.
And then right to the camera here, it's just pointing right at you.
Okay. By way of introduction, my name is Leonard Fawn, middle name, last name is Timoni. I was born in 1952, so I'm an old guy, been around for a while. And I was born and raised in Wilmington, North Carolina. I went to elementary school there, middle school there, junior high. I was very much looking forward to going to the same school that I had gone to all those previous years I just mentioned, Williston School in Wilmington, North Carolina. We were all that at one point in time. In Wilmington, North Carolina, Williston was built and started to receive students shortly after Civil War, a few years after that. And we had a very proud heritage. We were very close-knit. And then in '65, forced integration. Martin Luther King was killed sometime during this period, and there was this forced integration movement all over the U.S. Williston had balked at integrating its school system. So finally, with the help of the federal government, they finally did. And unfortunately for me and a lot of other students like me, we were uprooted from our school at Williston. And I ended up being sent to, at the time, an all-white school, John T. Hoggard High School. And John T. Hoggard High School had only been there for about 3 years, let's say, before we were integrated into it. So that was a very turbulent time for not just me, but not just the students, but also our faculty, which is all black because Williston was an all black school, and also the community itself. It was very heartbreaking for a lot of us. So there were, of course, some hard feelings. Yes, there were riots, and there were fights. Now that I'm here, I can tell you I'm obviously a survivor, and I thought the experience of going to John T. Hoggard High School, I cannot, in all honesty, look back and say it was a totally bad experience. The opposite is true. It was a very good experience, except for the forced integration part of it. But I did graduate from John T. Hoggard High School. I was my senior year, one of only 2 blacks on the school, on the football team, and because we had problems here and there. I graduated in 1970, and at our graduation ceremony, I was voted the most likely to succeed from the entire senior class. I, in fact, received a football scholarship to Princeton University, which I declined. I look back at that declination and kind of wish sometimes that I had accepted it, but I've since gotten over that, and it all worked out.
What were the main reasons at the time you didn't accept it?
Well, foolish on my part, I would say now, and it was because of the 2 individuals that came from Princeton to recruit from John T. Hoggard High School. These 2 recruiters had 2 names that they wanted to recruit from John T. Hoggard High School. The person that approached me of these 2 had my name, and I was offered a full scholarship, football scholarship, to play football at Princeton. And I was told right up front that I was only to play football which is why they were recruiting me, and that if I got behind in my academics, they would provide me with a tutor. They also informed me that the campus at the time was figuratively split in half, blacks on one side and whites on the other. Well, in my mind at the time, especially after having read the autobiography of Malcolm X my junior year, which affected me a great deal, I wanted nothing to do with a scholarship where I was only recruited for my physical attributes and not necessarily my mental attributes or capacity. I even considered it an insult where they said, when you get into trouble with your academics, we would provide you with a tutor. I considered that an insult. So it was for those reasons that I declined that scholarship to go to Princeton.
I knew growing up that you were really good at football in high school. Do you mind telling that story about the invitation you got and then the check that you received?
Oh, you mean my travels abroad?
Yeah, tell me about that. And then I think you told me you got invited and like a white lady gave you a check actually.
Ah, yes. My senior year, there was this program, it is still around, I believe, called Institute for Foreign Study, headquartered, I believe, in Connecticut. They were offering scholarships for high school students to spend a few weeks over the course of summer after graduating to travel abroad. Well, I was fortunate enough to receive not a full scholarship, but a half scholarship. When I was approached with this idea of accepting some sort of scholarship to travel abroad, I was told that it was not wise or prudent at that time for me to put in an application for a full scholarship to travel abroad, because up until then, there had not been a black student, high school student, that was accepted to travel. So we went in for a half scholarship, and I got that half scholarship. Of course, I needed to make up the money for the other half, and in doing so, I was offered the opportunity to go on the local television station where I was interviewed, and the network actually created a scholarship fund for me where people could actually, donate monies. And the story that my son just asked me to elaborate on was a story that I told him, which is in my memories. At the time, my surrogate mother approached me and said to me, there is a lady that would like to donate to your scholarship fund. She is a very fine lady. And she said, my surrogate mom said to me, I will make sure that you know what to say when you get there. But she said, I will drive you there. We will pick out what it is you're going to wear when you get there. She is going to actually present you with a check. So one day she dropped me off. She lived behind this high brick wall. You couldn't see her home from the streets. I went to the door, knocked. A butler actually came to the door, asked me to wait, came back, took me into this sitting room, asked me to take a seat. I did, and in walks this fine lady. I, of course, stood up, just like my surrogate mom told me to watch my manners. So we sat, and she clapped her hand at one point in time, and the gentleman, I assume was a butler of sorts, brought in a scrapbook. And I was shocked. This lady had a scrapbook of my times when I played football at John T. Hoggard High School, starting my sophomore, junior, and senior years. I played for them for 3 years. And we sat there and we talked about football. And at the conclusion of that conversation, she clapped her hands again. Someone else brought in a silver tray. On that tray was an envelope. She stood, I stood, she presented it to me, thanked me for my time, and wished me luck on my trip abroad. And I could not tell you today how much that check was, but it was a sizable amount of money. And it is something that I've always had in my memory bank, because that was something that really did affect me in a way that told me that there are people in this world that are gracious, that are generous, and as long as you minded your manners, did great things, then people would, in all probability, do great things for you.
I'm sure it was like a mixed bag of emotions around that time, especially in regards to like racial relations. I'm sure reading the book on Malcolm X kind of made you feel a certain way, but then I'm sure also, getting help from people of all races also impacted you a lot. How did you feel those first, that first day of integration? Do you remember how it was that first year, that first day, or that first week?
I do. I felt robbed. I felt as though I was being deprived of something that I was very much looking forward to, and that was being a Williston High School graduate. And in Wilmington at the time, of course, we had our share of racial problems. Me growing up, I was never the kid that hung on the block or did bad things or followed or gangs and things like that. That was never me. I was always studious. I was always curious. I was always interested in human behavior, sort of thing. And my mother instilled in me, a mother that never went to school a day in her life, that was a slave in South Carolina at the time and moved from South Carolina to North Carolina. She instilled in me certain virtues, a sense of morality and things like that. So I considered myself a good kid. But when we were forced to go to a high school that was unfamiliar to us, unfamiliar with me, and after having read the autobiography of Malcolm X, it reminded me of not slaves, it reminded me of Africans when they were shanghaied off of the continent of Africa and brought here to America. It reminded me of those times when we were uprooted from Williston to Hoggard. So there were fights, and we did not get along. The notion was for us to get along if we were going to survive. I mean, you can only fight for so long. It wears on you. So I concentrated on my studies and doing what I had to do. Now, after I read that autobiography of Malcolm X, I told you it deeply affected me. When I was at John T. Hoggard, I tended to not look at race. I didn't care really who you were. I've always looked people in the eye when I spoke to them. Never really felt that anybody was better than me. So I had acquired a number of friends, white friends, if you will, at John T. Hoggard. As a matter of fact, I was voted the vice president of the senior class when I was at Hoggard. But before my senior year, after reading that autobiography, I recall vividly there was this white girl. She and I were very good friends, and she would allow me to look at her paper come testing time, and I would sit behind her and she'd scoot her paper over and I'd look and I'd get answers. Her name was one. She was a very good friend of mine until I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. I disrespected her by avoiding her, not even speaking to her. And in class, I no longer sat behind her. So I completely alienated her from my life. And it was during this time when I received a huge slap in the face, figuratively, from my surrogate mom when she called me, who was a librarian, by the way, at Hoggard, John T. Hoggard. When she called me in and she said to me, "What is your problem?" And she explained it to me. She said, "Wanda was in to see me and she was in tears. What are you doing?" And she even said to me, my mom, "I have even noticed a change in your behavior." So I went on to explain myself. And I told her about the autobiography of Malcolm X and, race relations in America and all that. And at the time when he was growing up and how he got the name Red and all this. And so she said, you have to get your act together. And I did. I did some soul searching, and I realized that during my time, that it was not the time to engage in that type of behavior where I was alienating people from my life that I had grown close with, and that were actually my friends.
And moving on from high school to college, I remember you telling me I can always mix it up. You can clarify whether it's philosophy or psychology, but can you explain how you butted heads with one of your teachers who I believe was a member of the KKK at the time?
He was not only a member of the KKK, he was a Grand Dragon.
Oh, dang.
When I declined the scholarship to Princeton, my mom, I'll just refer to her as mom, not my biological mom, my real mom, biological mom, died my junior year when I was in high school. So my surrogate mom really took me on under her wings after that. But when I declined that scholarship, I did manage to travel abroad, like I said. That opened my eyes to a lot of things. That was the first time I'd ever, left, been on a plane. I got to see different kinds of people. Went to, Rome and Paris, Switzerland, London, places like that. Met some wonderful we were all high school kids. So that was an eye opener for me after having, grown up in the ghetto in Wilmington, North Carolina. So my mom managed to help me get a scholarship to attend the University of North Carolina there in Wilmington. What my mom did not tell me until years later, 30-ish years later, that before I started UNCW, she and another professor, a white professor, they got together, and this white professor was to be my mentor. But he never told me this. But my mom had him look out for me while I was at the university. Well, what I wanted to do was, my major was psychology. I figured that, I told you earlier that I was very much interested in human behavior. So I ended up signing up to be a psychology major. Well, it was during this one particularly hard, grueling psych class, my very first one. I was about to say, of course, but I was the only black in this particular class. And when it came to the end of that term, we were told by our professor, who also was the head of the psychology department, we were told to come up with a project, present it to himself in the class, and that he would grade it, and that it would become a major part of what grade he would decide we would get for that term. Well, I never forgot the autobiography of Malcolm X. And one thing in particular was, there was a passage in his book where Malcolm X said that in order for the races to get together, that the white race, white man / woman had to give birth to the black race / black man woman. I never forgot that. And in my head, I visualized, I came up with a depiction of what that birthing process will look like. So for my project, for the psych class, with the help of my uncle, I built a platform. I put an operating table on this platform. I bought a white doll baby, put her on this platform. I put her legs up in stirrups, covered her in a sheet, got little black miniature little people, painted them all black, put them between her legs, this white woman representing the white race, these little black figures, the black race. So that was my rendition of, my depiction of whites giving birth to blacks. Presented it to my class. My classmates loved it. Absolutely loved it. At the conclusion of that class, we took turns in class presenting our projects. When it came my turn, that was my project I just told you about. Well, at the conclusion of that class, the professor handed out the grades. And I got my grade. It was a failing grade. So I stayed behind to chat with him. And he would not give, so to speak, in listening to me, giving me a good enough ear where he would really try to understand in more detail where I was going with what I wanted to convey with this project that I had presented to the class. That had nothing to do with me being a militant and wanting to start riots on campus or anything like that. He said, anything you want to do, this is what I did. And I said that, it should be accepted in that vein. Well, he said he was not going to change my grade. And I was not happy. And I made, at the time, an error on his part, when I said, well, sometimes I said I wasn't satisfied with the grade. And then I was going to take it further. He asked me, what did I mean by that? And I said to him, well, there's more than one way to solve a problem. You can look up, you can look down, you can go, east or west or whatever. And sometimes you have to go through something to get what you want. He took that as a violent act on my part or a violent statement. So I left unhappy. I went to see my mentor. Dr. Gerald Shin was his name. He's no longer with us. And I explained to him what I just explained to you in this video. And that was when I was told by Dr. Gerald Shin, who was the head of the philosophy department, that professor that I had was, in fact, a Grand Dragon of the KKK in Wilmington. And there was no way he would allow me to graduate from that university with a degree in psychology. It wasn't going to happen. So I changed my major to philosophy, and I minored in religion.
In going, joining the military, becoming a lieutenant colonel in the military, did you ever feel like you ran into any, hard discrimination that again made you kind of veer your path once you were no longer in college, but even in the military? Or do you feel like, no, the military is actually, not completely fair, but I know you've said the military in a way seems like a big family sometimes.
Yes, here's what I gleaned from my experiences in the Air Force. And I gave the Air Force 24 and a half years. And I retired, as my son just said, the rank of lieutenant colonel. I will tell you, and then I'll backtrack, I was about to go up for promotion to full bird colonel, but it was right before that time when I was considering retirement. when my commanding officer said to me, T, don't retire. You will get a DP or a definite promote to full bird colonel. And at this time, I was stationed at Kelly Air Force Base in San Antonio. And I'm like, wow. But I chose to retire anyway. And the reasons why was because I was a young lieutenant colonel, and even with the DP, definite promote, I would have had to waited a year and a half to 2 years before I put the rank on, which meant I would not get that pay for full bird colonel until I actually put it on. And the kicker for me was I was told that as soon as I was selected for promotion, that the Air Force was going to send me off on a quote unquote remote assignment. And that's when you get sent off by yourself without your family. Well, this guy that has his camera on me right now, at the time, he was only a baby. He's my only son. I could not bring myself to leave him again and go off for a year, because right before I had that assignment, I was in Germany by myself on what I call the remote assignment, even though it wasn't. I was there for 2 years, and I was there for 2 years because I was asked to be on that assignment by a 4-star general. So it was a by name request, and I accepted that assignment 2 years by myself without my family, because the Air Force told me before I accepted it that I had in fact been selected for lieutenant colonel. So that was enough enticement for me to go on that assignment. So here I was some time after that. Now I'm offered a DP for colonel. Well, I did not see my son hardly at all when I was in Germany. He was born in the United States when I was in Germany, even though I came back for his birth. But then I had to go back. And one of the things that, there are things that happens to people. It's in my world, I call them significant emotional events, or C. We all have them. One significant emotional event in my life was when my family came to visit me in Germany with my son, who's only a few months old, son being the guy that has this video trained on me. His mother was holding him in his arms. We're at the airport. They need to board a plane. I transferred my son from my arms to her arms. As they were walking off, my son reached back to me, outstretched arms, crying, not wanting to leave. That affected me. So I had to find a corner and cry my heart out. Well, that was Germany. Left Germany, went to San Antonio at Kelly Air Force Base. The definite promote, I told you about that. For those reasons, I decided to turn that down and actually retire. Now, my 24 and a half years in the Air Force, they were not, all of that time wasn't gravy. I had various assignments, different places. But one thing I learned from being in the Air Force was, I don't care who you are, what your beliefs are, your religious background, anything like that. If you put your nose to the grindstone, concentrate on doing your job, trust that you will be rewarded for doing a good job. I learned that from my mother. When I was in the Air Force, I applied those things that she taught me. So even though there were times when I did not get what I felt I deserved and it went to someone else, I still kept my nose to the grindstone, and I continued to do my job. I continued to treat people as I wanted to be treated myself, and it all panned out. So there were ups and downs in the Air Force. I met good people. I met bad people. And one of the things that I told my son to give you a good idea as to what my attitude is, which kind of will tell you how I view life. There were 2 times in my military career when I had 2 white bosses, 2 separate occasions, 2 different assignments say to me, almost verbatim, when I was confident that a position that I was taking on something that I was presenting as being right, and I was repeatedly told, no, 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 yet I persisted twice, and that is my attitude, that is my notion, that is who I am. But these 2 times, this person said to me, you know what? You are, quote unquote, you are aggressive to the point of being arrogant. On those 2 occasions, my comeback was to this person, to this white person saying this to me, was, you know what? If I were white, you would not have phrased that the way you did.
Mm-hmm.
So, so my 24 and a half years in the Air Force, I loved it. Would not trade it, taught me a lot, had a lot of fun, ups and downs, but.
And I would say from you, I've learned, to be, very open-minded. I tell people all the time, I feel like I get, my open-minded perspective from my parents. I guess, as a teenager, I kind of resented the generational gap, that my parents having me in their 40s, there was definitely a big gap. And now I really appreciated the perspective that you have. I guess, I'd kind of be remiss if I didn't ask. I had a client recently in my line of work. She was a lady. She told me she remembers being on the bus when it was still segregated as a little girl, and her mom having to explain to her like, oh no, you can't sit there, that's for like white people. Is there any like interesting memories that you have like as a little kid, like remembering just kind of stuff like that?
Yes. In Wilmington, on my side of the tracks where blacks were, because it was segregated. Whites lived over here and blacks lived over here. We had our own theaters and all this. I have vivid memories of every Sunday being, not every Sunday, a lot of Sundays being given a quarter by my mom, and other kids that I played with would be given a quarter, and we would go to the Ritz Theater, all black, and we used that quarter and would get us admission, a bag of popcorn, a soda, and a candy bar. I would never forget that. Well, downtown Wilmington, North Carolina, blacks, whites, we all went to stores, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing, when myself as a black, was downtown Wilmington, where there were a lot of white folks, because downtown is a central area. That's where people would go socialize, they do their shopping. We always had to mind our manners. I don't ever remember a time, like in some southern places, where if a white person is coming and you're on the same sidewalk, that you had to step off and let them pass. No, I don't remember that. The one thing that I do remember is at this one theater, they had a colored entry into the theater. There was a ticket booth outside on the sidewalk. You would go to this ticket booth, pay for your ticket. Whites could then go either side of the ticket booth, go into the theater. Blacks, Negroes, colored people, we could not do that. There was to the side a door. We had to open that door. There was someone standing there, would take your ticket. You go up the steps to the balcony, and that's where the colored people watched the movie with the whites below. And at the top of this door entryway were the words "colored only." Yes, I remember the water fountains in Wilmington, colored only, and things like that. I would tell you an interesting story. I was in college at UNCW, and I did a paper, a project on the Wilmington race riots of 1898. In researching that, I needed some materials that were in the downtown Wilmington library. I went to get these materials, only to be told that there was a room, an area in this library that I was not permitted. When asked the question why, colored people are not allowed back there. And my comeback was, well, when I look in the catalogs, the material that I want on this particular subject, the race riots of 1898, is back there. I was told, no, we cannot allow you to go back there. So I called my mentor, Dr. Gerald Shin, and passed that on to him. And only because of him making a phone call that I was allowed to go back to obtain the materials that I needed for this particular project / paper. I was in college at the time.
That's amazing. That's astonishing, honestly. That's crazy. Well, thank you so much for the interview. Yeah, we'll have to, if I get some more questions, I would love to ask you. Thank you for your time.
Quite welcome. Thank you very much.